I would like to start off with this. I know a lot of people would love to see some of these entities up close and personal. Some people want to have their own encounters so bad that they seek these things out. As a man that has had an encounter with such things, I beg you, do not go looking for them. You consider me to be lucky, having seen something that sheds light on the mysteries of the universe. I consider you to be the lucky ones, having the joy of not having experienced such fear. About myself, my name is Eli. No last name will be given. I'm 54 years old, but this encounter took place coming up on 10 years ago. I live in Cleveland and teach at a college campus there. I want to be as discreet as possible with my personal information. I just can't risk my colleagues finding out. It may put my reliability in question in their eyes. I've always had a passion for knowledge, and I take my education very seriously. The thought of something like this existing always seemed trivial to me. I would never denounce their existence, I'm not ignorant enough for that, but it was more along the lines of never giving it more than a fleeting thought. I am now a true believer, and have been for the last 10 years. This was not a prank. This was not an elaborate hoax set up by some friends to scare me. The kids that I encountered had preternatural abilities. I was a witness to that myself. The fear alone that they seemed to be able to produce proves to me that this was a true encounter with something we have absolutely no idea about. As far as my encounter goes, this is my story. I would testify in court that everything I am putting in this correspondence actually happened to me. The night in question was January 7th of 2011. A friend of mine had been traveling through Canada and had asked me the favor of staying at his home while he was away. I would be responsible for the care of his furry companions. 2 dogs, one a Sheltie named Jefferson, and the other a mixed breed named Mac, and 2 cats. These feline companions were both domestic shorthairs, and named Sam and Carrie. All 4 of these animals were very friendly and loved to interact with whomever was in the house. I'd been there for almost 2 weeks by this point, and had learned all of their quirks. The cats usually hung out in the master bedroom, lazily lounging around for most of the day. Both dogs preferred to be in the same room as me, and would usually follow me throughout the house as I moved around. On this night, however, all 4 of them were being extremely out of character. I assumed they were acting off because they missed their owner, something I couldn't do anything about besides pay some extra attention to them and, of course, sneak a few extra treats. The dogs would stay in the back bedroom, seemingly refusing to leave the room entirely. I even tried to entice them with some leftover chicken, but still, they wouldn't budge. The cats, on the other hand, were running around the house like the devil was chasing them. They would dart from the master bedroom to the kitchen, then go in a wide circle around the living room and back into the master. When they were in the front room, they would always begin to hiss. It was a very peculiar behavior for these normally lazy creatures. After a while, I had gone out to the front yard to have a smoke, and then headed to my car to retrieve my handbag that I work with. I was parked in the driveway and had walked from the house to the car. I know there was no child present at this time. However, this young boy seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He was on my left-hand side, between myself and the house. I was in my car for only a moment. There was no time for a kid to run up from the street and circle around me. And this small child just seemed out of place from the get-go. His manner of dress was very outdated. Faded denim pants and a red and white striped shirt with black sneakers. But these clothes seemed to be a size or two too big for him. His hair looked slightly shaggy and was a dirty blonde color. I was a child in the 70s. His attire reminded me very much of the things I used to wear. I just don't see kids wearing these things anymore. I'd place him at about 8 or 9 years old. Very young, especially for the time of night it was. The last time I had checked the clock, it was 10:15. That had to be over half an hour ago now. Why was such a small child out this late? And alone, for that matter. He looked very pale, almost shock white. He also seemed to have this overwhelming sadness to him. He did not look like a happy child. Now, let me be clear about this. I am by no means a small man. I am thick and tall, standing at 6'3". I played football for my college, and I still maintain a good diet and exercise routine. I'm telling you this because it's a testimony to how I do not scare easily. This child, however, unnerved me from the very beginning of my encounter with it. I have felt fear like this before, once when I was out hiking. This was many years before this encounter. I had stumbled upon a cougar that seemed particularly interested in me, and proceeded to follow me for a considerable distance. It was very out of the ordinary for a cougar. I assumed it was sick or injured, and had thought of me as an easy meal. This is how I felt when I was face to face with this child. Like I was its prey. I've learned over the years to listen to my instincts. They were telling me that something was wrong. I asked this child if I could help him, still maintaining a calm composure. I didn't want this young thing to know it scared me, although deep down I'm sure it already knew. The little boy said, and I quote, "Our mom wants to know where we are. Could we please come inside and use your telephone?" This sentence struck me as odd for several reasons. The way this child spoke was just too proper for a child of his age. It sounded rehearsed, the same way a door-to-door salesman reads from a card. Another reason was that he said, "Our mom wants to know where we are," instead of, "We need to tell our mom where we are." It was just strange to me. But the thing that bothered me the most was the use of the word "we" when there was nobody else around. Then, as if on cue, I felt a strange sensation behind me, like something was there that shouldn't be. I could actually feel the static on my back. I looked back quickly, and standing there were two more of these kids. Just as with the first child, there was no way that these things could have snuck up behind me without my knowing. They would have had to come from the direction of the house, because I was facing the street, and there were no other children present. These children seemed just as strange as the first. There was another boy and a girl. The girl seemed slightly older, maybe by a year or two. She was taller than the little boys. The second boy seemed to be about the same age as the first. Both of these children looked just as odd, including their clothing. The boy seemed to be swimming in his clothing. The pants and shirt were far too large for him, even more so than the first child. If that one's sizes were 1 or 2 sizes too big, this other child had to be 3 or 4. The clothes also seemed old and worn, and this kid had short brown hair. The girl's hair was very dark, a very, very dark shade of brown. It was a definite contrast to her very pale skin. She wore a light blue dress that seemed to be from another era, and they both had white sneakers on. It was then that I realized these 3 beings were trying to corner me. They were slowly moving towards me. They were strategically trying to corner me where the garage and the house met. And then I noticed something else. Something I should have noticed right off the bat. All 3 of them had eyes as black as could be. I have no idea, even to this day, why that wasn't the first characteristic that I noticed. But I do feel very confident it has something to do with the way they can entrance you. Their eyes just reminded me of the eyes of a shark. The entirety of the eye was jet black. When I did notice their eyes, my body chilled. It must have dropped several degrees. I was almost numb, yet I could feel this buzzing sensation inside my body. It was all in all a very weird sensation that's still hard for me to pinpoint to this day. I truly believe I was under their hypnosis at this point. Perhaps it has something to do with their eyes. maybe they have a hypnosis-like ability to them, and it's only after they feel they have you that they reveal their true appearance. They asked again to use the phone, and again it was in that peculiar speech, almost like it was mechanical or recorded from some other time and just being played back this time. My body was tense with fear. I knew I had to do something, yet at the same time I wanted to hear what they had to say. It was like every warning bell in my body was going off, telling me that this was a bad situation and I needed to vacate the area. Yet, I still felt the urge to help these kids. I think I was mesmerized, really. I had two completely opposite impulses tugging at me to do something. It was quite the paradox. My brain finally seemed to snap out of the trance I was in, and I began to move away from them, up towards the house. I told them I needed to get back inside and that I couldn't help them. As I slipped past them, I apologized and headed for the house. I was hoping that they would leave, but instead, the three of them spread out and started following me. I had a child on either side of me, and one behind me. They were flanking me, and again, I felt the odd sensation of the fear of being hunted. The girl tried to ask about using the phone this time, and again, it was in an odd speech pattern. She sounded almost the exact same as the first little boy, except female, of course. I explained that we only had a landline. It was an obvious lie, but what else can one do in this situation? I was for sure not letting them in. Let us in. Our mom is worried. She needs to know where we are. That time it was the second boy that spoke. His voice sounded just as hollow as the other two. I told them that I couldn't let them in, because I wasn't the owner of this house, and I was just watching it for them while they were away. The three of them stopped in their tracks. I got to the porch and turned around to face them. And now, this is one of the scarier parts of my encounter, simply because of how in tune they all seemed. All three of them slowly turned their heads to face each other. They stared at each other for a long moment. And somehow, in my gut, I knew they were communicating with each other. At least, that's what it felt like, because of the way they nodded to each other, as if they were agreeing on how to proceed with this situation. The girl turned to look at me and said, "You could call the one that lives here. Ask if we can come in." Now, God's honest truth, this girl really freaked me out. I'm not gonna lie. In fact, even typing this right now is making my palms sweaty and sending chills down my spine. They really needed an invitation into this house. I had no doubt I was dealing with something supernatural. I'd be a fool not to believe what was right in front of me. And there was something aggressive and demanding about them now. They were trying with all their might to be invited into this home. Who knows what they would do once they were in here? The girl asked again, and I told them flatly that I wouldn't be inviting them in, that they needed to leave this place before I called the authorities. The second boy tried to join in, and he started to cry. He turned slightly, put his head in his hands, and began crying. I knew it was just a tactic to get them inside. The cry hardly sounded real. It sounded like a recording of a different child. Just what the hell was I up against, I started thinking. Panic started setting in, because it seemed to me like these beings were capable of mimicking human speech, because I knew that cry was not coming from that little boy. I finally had got past the threshold of the house, and I turned to face them, now with slightly more courage. I knew one thing for certain: they couldn't come into this house unless they were invited. Yet, I still felt the urge to go back outside and console that crying child. Again, probably with the hypnosis. The three of them stayed at the door, staring at me. I should have slammed it in their faces. Hell, I wanted to, but there was a part of me that couldn't bring myself to turn these children away. It was to the point where I was so mesmerized by them that I almost invited them in, but the girl said I needed the permission of the people that lived here. I couldn't just invite them in myself. I remember thinking, how in the hell did she know what I was thinking? How did she know I was wanting to let them in? And then I remember just staring at them, trying to figure out what to do. I wanted so badly to help them. I was falling into a trance again. Then, Jefferson barked from behind me, and it was such a loud bark that it jarred me, and I snapped out of that fog I was in. I turned to face my canine savior, and he was growling at these kids. Something I had never known Jefferson to do, ever, and I had known Jefferson his entire life. For the majority of the time that they were there, Jefferson seemed to be hiding, but at the last moment, before I gave in to these creatures, he came into the room like saving grace, and snapped me out of that trance. The feeling I felt during this, I can only compare to those moments when you're dozing off, and you don't even realize it until somebody jars you awake. That's exactly how I felt while I was under the influence of their gazes. I again told them they needed to leave, and I swore that I was going to call the cops. It was then that they all appeared to have heard something, or sensed something that I couldn't, because all three of them turned their heads to look over their shoulder. It was so in sync that it looked like it was rehearsed, but I assure you, they sensed something out there. I honestly felt like I was living in the village of the damned. The girl, who I've come to think of as their leader, turned to face the street and said, "Come." She began walking, and the two boys followed her, one after the other. They walked in a single file line down the sidewalk, turned and walked down the street, in perfect formation. No, I did not leave the safety of that house to see where they went. I would be crazy to go outside. Once I was sure they were gone, though, I poured myself a very stiff drink, and then I poured myself a second one. I slept with the lights on that night, even though I was fairly sure these things couldn't enter a home without an invitation. I had the dogs by my side all night long, too. When my friend arrived home, about a week and a half later, I told him all about my encounter, but I'm still not sure if he actually believes me or not. He did promise me, though, not to invite anyone inside that he didn't know, whether it be a child or an adult. Sometimes he brings it up and tries to joke about it, but I can't and have never seemed to find the humor in the situation that I was in. I have no idea what these entities are, but I don't think they're friendly. I hate to think of what would happen to somebody if they did invite one inside of their home. These beings are predatory in nature, and they have abilities I could not understand. This is the only paranormal encounter I've ever had. I pray that I never have another. What in the name of the Almighty are these beings? Thank you, Supernaturalist.